Hi, welcome back to Season 4 of the Tummy Team Journey. I am Kelly Dean, physical therapist and founder of the Tummy Team, and I'm your host. This is the podcast where we talk about how investing in your functional core and pelvic floor strength can actually change your life. So let's get started. Hi, everybody. It's Kelly Dean, and we're back. And today, my guest is a friend and colleague, Christina Trautman. Christina is a pelvic floor PT. She has a business called the Pelvic Floor Place. She actually worked at the Tummy Team in our clinic for a little bit. We've collaborated on a lot of different things together, shared some clients. She comes with me on some of my trainings. And we're going to have a good discussion today for you. So, hi, Christina. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
We had like a little pre-chat before we turned this on because Christina just moved in to a brand new space. And we were talking about that transition, and it's pretty exciting to see kind of the work she's doing. And I think you'll get to hear her heart as we go through today. But how many clients did you have this morning already?
3. Had 3 this morning. Mm-hmm.
And then you break to do this, and then you have this afternoon?
Yep.
Okay. You're busy.
Yeah.
Well, when I was just going to, so the topic that we're going to talk about today is what are the obstacles that people face fixing their pelvic floor or treating their pelvic floor? Like, I was thinking when we were talking about kind of releasing a new season, I knew that I wanted to have a little bit more conversational dialogue with some colleagues and some clients. We're now on video, not just audio. And so I like that conversation back and forth. And one of the things that came up was, I hear from clients a lot of how long they put off getting care. And then also within my community of my parents and in-laws and friends, and how much people have just normalized dysfunction and all the different reasons why we don't get care. And then I see the people that did get care that are like, oh my gosh, why did I wait so long? It wasn't as bad or as hard or as difficult or as emotional, or it was emotional, but it was good. And I just wanted to unpack all of that. I don't even know how to put that into a title. We'll figure it out. And I thought, I bet it's a dialogue that we've had before, and I wanted to have that dialogue with you. You experience this, I'm sure.
All the time. Yeah. In fact, when you sent me the email of asking me to do this, sometimes when I'm on podcasts or doing different classes or whatnot, I really have to sit down and do an outline. And immediately I can think of a whole page worth of things. I didn't even have to really prepare at all because, yeah, this is a huge piece, especially in the pelvic floor physical therapy world. It's such a different emotional piece to it compared to going to orthopedic PT or, after surgery or whatnot. It's so much more emotional and private that it brings on a lot of other obstacles and barriers for sure. So yeah, I see this all the time. And I've had some really interesting conversations in the last couple of weeks since you asking me this. I have asked some patients who I haven't known right away what were the reasons why they didn't come in sooner or whatnot. And it's just been interesting hearing from them and their stories and how vast and how many different issues there is around this. So yeah.
Yeah, I feel like when we do a podcast like this, it's going to speak to some of those people. Nobody's alone. We don't live in a vacuum. You think your issues are just your issues or your concerns or your worries or your fears, but I think it's really valuable and validating for people to go, oh, I'm not the only one that thought that, and this is how that they approached that and they dealt with that. And we also, we're real people. We're women, and we have stuff that we sometimes don't deal with as quickly as we could. And we know that we need to, right? We know that we're
Right.
very proactive and we still don't do it. So there is no shame. This is like, there is no matter what excuse or reason or vulnerability or thing that we talk about today, there is no shame that we intend at all when we're talking about this. We get it. We know it's hard. Our hope is to help people see that they can take at least one step forward and that they're worth it, that they're
Yeah.
worth it, that they're the things that they might think are just little inconveniences are actually impacting their life in dramatic ways, and
Yeah.
they might not know it until it's better, right?
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
so I just want them to have that.
Yeah.
So, all right. So let's get started and let's talk about like all right, we kind of put it in like little areas because we could just go off on a ton of rabbit trails, which we might, and that's totally fine. That's who we are. But what, let's start with what's the first thing that you would say that is like first category? Do we want to say vulnerabilities?
Yeah, I would say like the first thing to come to my mind, probably the most people struggle with is trust. Right? They know that there's something wrong. They know that this exists. They know pelvic floor PT exists, whether they've heard it from friends or somebody, or they've just seen it on social media, is trusting that this stranger, right, is going to validate their symptoms, their issues. They're not going to judge them, and that they're actually going to treat them and make them feel supported, right? And so when you go to see an orthopedic PT, who cares who it is, right? As long as they're good at what they do, it doesn't really matter necessarily male or female usually. But when we're dealing with pelvic floor, right, there's so many more emotions involved in it in terms of sexual and bowel and bladder function. There's this cultural taboo around talking about this stuff and doing this stuff that if you're not even talking to your spouse about it, you're not even talking to your partner about it, how the heck are you going to talk to a stranger about it? You know? And so I think there's this level of, and whether that's conscious or unconscious, probably a lot of it is unconscious, of just being able to, can I really do this? Am I going to be able to trust this person with eyes? Are they going to hold space for me?
Yeah. I think that there's a little bit of guilt and shame that comes too. Like people feel like uh it shouldn't happen to them, that they're broken, that there's something
Yeah,
wrong with them, like that they should be able to have babies and not fall apart. They should be able to age
100%.
gracefully. I'm exercise, I eat right, I do this, or I haven't really taken care of myself. I've let some things go. I haven't prioritized my own health and I'm feel ashamed by that. And we all know, like we see so often not not to be really negative about the medical community and doctors because there's good and bad in everything. There's good and bad in every area. Sometimes you'll have a great doctor, but we know a lot of people that have been told, well, you just need to lose weight. And they just, if they're overweight, everything else is dismissed. Every other symptom they have is
Yeah,
dismissed until they lose 50 pounds. And I feel like that is
yeah,
just such a ridiculous approach. Somebody that's 50 pounds overweight knows it and they know it. It's not a secret, but they still have back
yeah,
pain. They still are wetting their pants. They still have pain that needs to be addressed. I think
yeah,
that I think that if people sometimes doctors want give people a quick fix because they think, oh, this person's not going to go to pelvic floor PT anyway, so I'm just going to tell them do this exercise or do this thing,
yeah,
and what they tell them is maybe not the right thing or is too much of something and sets the person up for failure. So now they're coming in feeling like, well, I couldn't do what my doctor said. So, there's like a lot of different things. And I just want to encourage people that if you didn't connect with whatever medical provider or whatever therapist, physical therapist, you didn't feel like you were heard or that they really connected to your story, you have the ability to see someone else.
Yeah.
Like, for some reason, we don't feel like if we go into a store in the mall and they don't have any clothes we like, we go to the next
I got
store.
another one. Yeah.
Right? But if
Yeah.
we buy something on Amazon, we don't like it, we return it, you know?
Yeah.
But if we go to a doctor and they say some things and it did not land and we didn't feel heard or supported or seen, we're like, "Well, I'm not gonna go to another doctor. I'm just gonna like, that's how it is."
Yeah.
And
Absolutely. Yeah,
yeah,
I definitely see that all the time, and but it's exhausting to then have to go to a new doctor, go to someplace else. So, I get it too. It's like, well, they're doing fine enough, I guess.
yeah,
But I was talking to a patient about this yesterday. She goes, in my mind, doctors are supposed to know everything when it comes to the body. And obviously that's not true now that I know that, but she goes, I went into my midwife appointment, told them about my symptoms, and this was a week ago. She told her midwife she's 15 weeks pregnant with her fourth, under 4 years. And she's telling the midwife about these symptoms, and she's like, you're fine. You just gotta, keep pushing through. And she's like, I felt so dismissed. And so I went home and she's like, thankfully I had a friend come over and I was telling her about this. She's like, I don't think I normally would have if she wasn't right there at home. And I was telling her about this and she told me about Christina, this pelvic PT. And she goes, oh, well, if my midwife didn't tell me to go to pelvic PT, then I don't need to go. And her friend was like, yeah, you do. Like, you need to go. You've had 4 kids in 4 years. Like, you need to go to a pelvic PT, regardless of what's going on. And she came in and she just was so like, she started crying first. She just felt like so supported, so validated. And she's like, I knew something was not right. But this person that I trust is telling me I just have to kind of push through and just keep going, instead of like how hard of it would have been for them to just refer me to you. But so it was really interesting to see that, like, we think these doctors are the end all be all, and if they're not referring out, which they don't do a lot for pelvic PT, I still don't 100% know why, because it's not that hard. And they're not having to go out of their way significantly to do that. But if they're not telling us to go, then we're not going, or they're what they have there can't do anything for me because my doctor said that it's not going to do anything. Right.
yeah.
So
I
yeah, there's
mean,
a lot of pieces to that.
and I think I also think, that sometimes they went to a pelvic floor therapist that didn't connect with them, and that
Yeah.
happens. There's different people, different personalities for everybody, and it doesn't necessarily mean that pelvic floor therapist didn't know what they were doing. Maybe their approach is a little bit, more sterile or more not as warm and some people would prefer that. And so there are different people out there, and it does take a little bit of time to find the right person. Um,
Totally.
but this is important stuff, and referrals are great from your friends, asking your friends, um, and interviewing the people, even calling the office and asking questions, looking at the website and asking questions, getting to know people. We'll talk a little bit more about how people can connect with people because it is important stuff. But I would say that these are really valid obstacles that
Yeah.
keep people from getting where they need to go. Um, and I just want to say, don't give up. You can take a break and say, I just need to like not think about fixing this for a moment, but just know it's on pause. It's not like removed because I see this a lot. We have one body that we get for our whole life. And we want to take care of it and we want to nurture it, we want to protect it. And how would you and a lot of the clients we see are mothers, and I'm always like, you need to be a mom to yourself. Like, if your child was having an issue, would you research the doctors? Would you ask all your friends which doctor to go to? What would you do to take your child there? You need to be your own mother and bring that nurturing maternal instinct to yourself, and you need to trust your instincts about your body. If something
Yeah.
feels like it is not right, it probably is not right. and there might be
Yeah.
a solution. And the other thing, because I train a lot of professionals, I train a lot of midwives at a midwifery college. I train a lot of PTs and OTs in functional pelvic floor and core stuff. And I always say, they might not know yet how to do it. It doesn't mean just because this person doesn't know how to fix it doesn't mean it can't be fixed. It means that
Yeah.
that person doesn't know how to fix it because the body is really it's really
Wow.
complicated.
Yeah.
Like I'm a PT, we're PTs. And maybe you're a little bit better than this at me because you did more orthopedic stuff as well. But if somebody came to me with an ACL injury, I am not your girl, you know? I'm not sure what to do about that. You know, I can help somebody with a brain injury or with a stroke because that was my area of specialty before I went into this. But and spinal
Whereas
cord,
I wouldn't even know where to start when it comes to like stroke or something like
right?
that.
We
Yeah,
went to the
orthopedics
same
I could
school.
figure out, but
We went to the same school. We went not
yeah,
the same college, but we went through the same we have the same degree in physical therapy. And, you know, and I can work with NICU patients. I was trained in that, but not everybody can, right? So you have
yeah,
to just recognize that there are specialists, there's different personalities, there's different interests that we've have. I feel like I have a passion to work with people that are older as well as people that have been through trauma. So there's just like not
yeah.
everybody. I met with another PT that was going it was a pelvic floor PT. I was trying to get to know them, and she was like, "I don't wanna work with anybody that's perimenopausal or older, and I don't deal with trauma." And I'm just like, "I don't know if you should be a pelvic floor PT." But,
Yeah.
but
That's a lot of the population.
that is a lot of the population. But, you know,
Yeah,
like, she knew what her niche was. So,
yeah,
I just wanna
yeah,
encourage people to, like, not give up, even though it's hard to get the inertia, right?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Um, some other things that I hear, and I put this kind of under excuses, which I don't like that label, but it is what it is. And these are excuses I made before I started getting care is it's not that bad, you know, it's
yeah,
not that bad. You know,
I hear
it's
that all the
only
time.
if I don't do this or I don't do that, it's okay, you know?
Yeah,
And then it became, okay, now if I don't do this, 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 and this, it's okay. And then it's like, if I don't do this, 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 then it's okay. It's just like the problem doesn't get smaller. It
right.
tends to get bigger. And my world gets smaller because I can't do the
Yeah.
things. You see that, I'm
But I
sure.
think too, versus it, I think there is that excuse, and for whatever reason, there's other barriers financially or other things we can talk about too. But there's also, well, my sister has this, and she's had 3 kids, and I've had 3 kids, and my mom had this, and she has had 3 kids, and so we start to think about, well, I think it's just part of it. It's just part of having kids is dealing with leaking and prolapse and pain with sex. Instead of, well, yes, just because half the population is having kids, it turns into more of yes, it's common, right? We've talked about this before of, it's common to have these symptoms because our body has gone through this huge transformation, but it's not normal to be experiencing these symptoms, right? And so not only is it them, oh, it's not so bad, I don't need help. It's not so bad, and I don't think there's anything else I can do about it. So
Right,
I'm just going to kind of sit with it.
right.
And so I think you don't know what you don't know. And if you've never heard this information or you're not around people who don't talk like this or, talk about this at parties or whatever, then you may not know that there is something out there for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I
But
think that's for sure. I think that also if you know of really bad situations, like people that like had really really bad situations, like, well, I'm not as bad as they were, you know.
yeah, totally. But then,
That's
I think go to this analogy of like a car, of if my like engine was like leaking fluid, would I just put a pad on it and be like, I'm just going to put this little tray underneath and I'm going to keep driving it? We would never do that. We would immediately call the mechanic. We immediately take our car in. There's something wrong with it. And I'm like, our bodies are way more expensive than a car is. Like, why would we not put investment into our bodies when we do into a car? I don't know. It's just really interesting sometimes to think about different scenarios like that, you know?
Yeah,
But
it's ingrained in us. I think it's also ingrained in women a little bit, to
yeah,
put themselves last on the list. I think it's, we'll take care of the kids, we'll take care of, everybody else's needs, and we'll kind of minimize our own. And I think some of that's learned behavior from our grandparents and
yeah,
grandmothers and mothers. Some of it's a little bit societal. Uh, I think it's changing though. I think social
I do
media, for
too.
one thing, is
It's huge.
making this a much more, uh, a proactive environment. I think that this is something that I talked with Megan about, the age of, people getting care is getting younger and younger,
Yeah,
instead of waiting until they're in their 50s or 60s and it's, like, dire, there's a lot more proactive. I think that that's
yeah,
happening more because people are talking about it. People are making funny little videos on Instagram about the pelvis and stuff,
yeah,
and the reality is, if everybody has a pelvic floor. I was gonna say if you're a woman, but men have pelvic floor too. Everybody has it. These are just
yeah,
muscles that hold our body together, and and it just is in a very intimate place, in a personal
yeah,
place. But it's just a group of muscles and
yeah,
bones, tissues, that do impact every single thing you do all day long.
yeah. Yeah, it's
Everything.
pretty amazing. The fact like that more there's not more brokenness and more dysfunction is kind of astounding, you know?
Well, and I think it comes down to the capacity of the body to heal. I mean, the body has this incredible capacity to heal, but it also needs support. If
Yeah,
we're asking a lot of ourselves, if we're having a lot of kids, or even one kid, or we're pushing ourselves physically in athletics or in our lives, then we're asking a lot out of, it's like going back to the car situation. When you are in a NASCAR drivers are only as good as their pit crew, right?
yeah,
They drive those cars hard. They have to time their pit stops very, very well. If they wait too long, it's way too long at the pit stop. If they go too early, they lose momentum in their life or in their race. So they time it, but they've got a really good they have to take care of that vehicle to make that race happen. And a
yeah,
lot of our clients are in a NASCAR race right now. They got 4 kids under the age of 4, or they're homeschooling 3 kids, or they're trying to work and exercise and raise a child. There's a lot of things going on. We're asking a lot out of our body, and we a little bit of investment will go a long way.
yeah,
Uh,
and that kind of brings us, into the financial
yeah.
conversation of, it just costs too much. And obviously I get that a little bit more than maybe the average, pelvic PT who takes insurance. But it's kind of interesting that we're actually about the same when it comes to when I can give super bills and they can get reimbursed by insurance and whatnot. It turns out to be kind of a wash usually. But yeah, it can look like a lot of money up front sometimes. But then we look at, well, how much do pads cost? How long have I been buying pads for? Or these doctor visits, or if I don't fix this, I'm going to look at a $20,000 prolapse surgery down the road. And so um, our bodies are going to either we give it that incentive. It's kind of like eating organic or eating healthy, right? We either do that now or we're going to have to pay the price later of all these different sicknesses and issues that happen. And so I think that you are truly investing in your body, right?
Mm.
Um, and so obviously there needs to be a buy-in of, I need to make sure that this is going to work. What if it
Yeah.
doesn't? What if I go there and she gives me a couple little exercises and it doesn't do anything? Now I just wasted a bunch of money, right? How am I going to know that this is going to work? And I think that's tricky when we're dealing with something like this, especially if they didn't grow up talking about this, or they didn't have a friend group that is helping them go through this. Until you have, like, majority of my patients that come in, it's not because one person told them to come in. It's because 4 different people told them to
Right.
come in. And by the 4th person, they're finally like, okay, I need to see this person, and then they're like, why didn't I come in sooner? But I
100%
think
of
it's
the time.
hard
Yeah.
to not have that, not to know if it's going to be, not if it's going to pay off financially or not, you
Yeah,
know?
we see the same thing here at the tummy team. Like we'll have it's funny, I'm working with this guy that does marketing. He's like, "Oh, women take a long time." I said, "Women in this area, they'll follow me on social media or get on my email list or, you know, be a free member on our site maybe for 3 years."
Yeah.
Before they actually do something. And it takes that long to build trust. It takes that long to
Yeah.
make the commitment to maybe they're actually buying their time. I know that I cannot I don't have the capacity for new learning until my kids get out of diapers, like they know something
Yeah.
about themselves. So we're going to talk a little bit about what they can do in that interim if that's a reality. I think another thing that I just want to touch on before while we can still talk about the money thing, 'cause I think that is an issue. But I also want to say is sometimes people are like, well, I'm going to just have another baby and I'm just going to it's kind of like, why make the bed if I'm going to get back in it again?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you know,
And I hate that one. And the reason I hate it is because the longer you wait, the harder it is going to be for me to help you fix this.
yes,
When I see
it's
patients come
not
in during their pregnancies, their postpartum is going to be so much easier, but they're thinking to them, well, I need to save my money for coming in postpartum because I know I'm going to need it then. You're going to have another kid then. There's another excuse that you're going to have to not be able to come in. And now we're dealing with really deflated tissue instead of during your pregnancy when you're a lot more active and we're obviously dealing with that stretch, but let's work on that tone and strengthening and getting you supported and setting
and
you up for
and
postpartum, right?
don't we need our pelvic floor to be like functional to give birth? I mean, like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a part of the process, right? So like,
Yeah.
yeah,
But I get
it's
it too. Like, I mean, it
oh,
is
we all did
in
it.
their
We
brain,
all did it.
right? Like, I get that logic. I understand why they would think that, about me being on the other side. I, so many times I have a, patient of like 3 and 4 babies. And recently I had a patient and she goes, man, my 4th pregnancy has felt so much better than my 1st or my 2nd pregnancy.
I hear
And
that.
it's because of the work that we're doing, the awareness, the breathing, just the postural stuff. And they're just like so astounded, like, wow, I didn't realize this could be so beneficial, instead of waiting until I'm done having
Yeah.
kids,
I hear that every day. I hear every day that like their 5th or 6th or 7th pregnancy was so much better because we did this work than their
Yeah.
first one, right? And I also want to remind the mamas that they have kids right now that need them, you
Yeah.
know, and you don't you need to think about how much you're limiting what you do with the kids you have, waiting until you're done having kids. You have you you set the tone. The mom sets the tone for the whole family. And it is worth it. And I think also what I tell my moms is that you are mirroring to your kids what it's like for them to take care of themselves as a parent. We
Yeah,
need to break
absolutely.
this generational lie that it's all about the kids and the parents don't have issues or they hide their issues. That's not serving anyone. I think it's really valuable for our children to see, hey, my mom is actually a human being, not a super person, a human being that also has owies and has hurts and needs to see a doctor and needs to do exercises and needs to take care of themselves. And it's creating an environment of a healthy lifestyle of how we take care of ourselves. Because I want my girls, and my son is now married, how he takes care of himself and helps take care of his wife. And I want my girls to, and I know my girls have been raised with this mom, and I want them to take care of themselves, and I want them to invest
Yeah.
in themselves and know, like, they're excited that I'm gonna be a part of their pregnancy journeys in the future, that I'm gonna help them. They're not worried if something, and they do hear a lot of scary stories, so they're, but they just know what could happen, and they know what they'll do to prevent it and what they'll do to treat it, because it's a big deal to grow a human being and push it out of a really small hole, you know?
So
It's
why wouldn't we wanna control as much as we possibly can, right? Like,
right,
that's how I kind of think of it. Like, if we can, even if it doesn't help 100%, what if we can at least help
better is
prevent
better.
some of these big pieces, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
And let's circle back to, like, that also comes down to the affordability of things. Like, um, I don't take insurance anymore
Everything
either.
is expensive.
Yeah, I'm all online. But I do feel like, what people get from a specialist is focused, intentional, like the right information at the right time, the right way. And if you're getting information from, if you're worried, like, hey, they're giving me exercises that I can't do or I didn't do, you know what? That's partly my job and your job, Christina, is us to go,
Yeah,
okay, what will you do? What can you do? Okay, how can we modify it? Help us. Don't lie to us, because you could come in and say, yeah, I did everything, and we check and we know you didn't do anything. Right? Your body's not lying,
yeah.
right? So, so, and it's okay. Just be honest and say, I could do this exercise, but I can't do this one because I have no wall like that, or I have no, if I lay down, my cat's on my face and my kids are on me, like I can't do any laying down exercises. So let us help you be creative. That's part of our job, is to make
Yeah,
things work for you. So I think not coming in with the excuse that they're going to give me exercises that take too much time, that are too hard, that I won't do, that I can't figure out. That's old school therapy. That is not what we do. It is very
yeah,
functional, it's very dialed in to what you can do, and it's very practical, because we have learned as therapists that the best exercise is the one you're going to do. And if we
yeah,
give you the best
absolutely.
exercise in the world, but you're never going to do it, that's not the best exercise.
Yeah, there's no
Consistency,
point.
it wins the day. So we look for something that's a sustainable, achievable, and that you can feel victorious with, and that will still be effective. And it is possible to do that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember working at Therapeutic Associates, and I would be in the gym with the other orthopedic PTs, and I was doing women's health there. And I remember this woman, she was telling this 30-year-old PT that she lives in a tiny house. She has 4 kids, and it was like 400 square foot place with really small ceilings. And so her posture wasn't great and stuff. And so he is on this plinth doing all these exercises, probably gave her 10 exercises to do. She's like 6 months postpartum. I mean, I should have been seeing her, but she had like knee pain or something. And he's giving her all these exercises. See this glazed over look. I'm like, she's not going to do any of those. And I remember being there when she came back, and you could just see like the shame in her of, man, I didn't do any of those exercises. I'm like, girlfriend, he did not set you up. He did not set you up for success, right? You told him all the barriers you had. He should have been giving you functional stuff you can do in a seated or position that's going to not have to, like, where you don't have floor space. You're not going to be able to lay on the floor. You have, that's the only place that you can get on the ground. And so, yeah, it's a huge piece to make sure that we're truly listening to our patients and what are they going to do? Where are they going to be the most successful? And there's so many different ways that we can bring that in, whether it is through fitness or whether it's through functional movements or, just helping them to think about with lifestyle, laundry and dishes and posture and different things like that. It can be so helpful just to help them figure it out. That's a huge piece
Yeah.
that I think a lot of PTs do miss.
Yeah. I think there's so many more things that we could talk about. There is fear, there's trauma, there's misinformation that people, we've talked a lot about the misinformation, I think. We've talked a little bit about the fear. Let's just talk a little bit about trauma, and then we'll kind of start moving into things that people where people could start. Like we talked about the obstacles, but so let's talk a little bit about trauma, and then we'll kind of move forward. So trauma is like a trigger word right now. It's like it's a lot. There's a lot of things about trauma out there, and sometimes counselors will be like, well, if it's not life threatening, it wasn't trauma. There's big T trauma and there's little T trauma. But what I usually do to define it is anytime that you had an experience that made you feel unsafe, out of control, um, threatened, hurt, and that lingered with you in some capacity. And what people don't realize is that you might not even know that it lingered with you until it resurfaces when you get married and start having sex, or when if you had a baby, or you have a second baby, or if you had a miscarriage, or you may not know, you may not understand what's going on in your body. This But the body does hold, you know, some of that memory, and it impacts you, and it can be the one of these seemingly, I'm not going to say it's irrational because it's actually not irrational, but one of these seemingly irrational reasons why, no, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I, you know, this is such a big situation that I created 2 trauma recovery courses, because I would see people that would start the work with me and hit a roadblock and then be just done. And I realized that, look, if I had something that I could just come in and say, this is what's happening, that roadblock you hit was some unresolved trauma that we need to kind of gently work through before we can come back and navigate the rest of this and have that resource for them. Um, it's a huge thing, and a lot of people think they don't need it. We now in our course model, when people become a member at the Tummy Team, they get access to all of the courses, so they don't have to
Cool.
pick. Oh, I want to do core foundations or I want to do the trauma course. They can start core foundations, and if they hit a speed bump, they can pause and do the trauma course, and then they can come back. And so I just feel like I want people to realize that it is this is such a this is such a a special part of our body. It's
Yeah.
personal, it's sacred, it gives birth, it connects us intimately to other people. That there's a lot of emotions tied to it that are real. And
Yeah,
it's
absolutely. I mean, this is
yeah.
this was me in a nutshell, was little T trauma, but a lot of little T's. And I didn't realize there was any T involved in it until, um, I had someone tell me that I had these issues. And when I kind of think back and how severe I had this really severe pelvic issues when I was little, and going into middle school and high school. I didn't realize it really till about college is when things really started impacting me. But my symptoms start as young as like 7 years old, of stress incontinence. And but remembering when I was telling people about my like horrific pelvic pain that I was having, they're like, "Oh, were you abused as a baby or kid?" And I was like, "No." And they're like, "Well, did you have like a car accident, or was there like a huge like trauma?" And I was like, "Nope, my body experienced trauma, but there was no like huge insult to it. But there was some mediocre insults to it from a nervous system standpoint that I didn't realize manifested in my body until I saw pelvic floor PT. And it's really the reason why I became a pelvic floor PT, was because of this. And interesting, like a lot of, I would say, trauma can manifest as pain, but it can also show up in other symptoms as well. But I would say pain is probably one of the main symptoms. Um, and patients, a lot of patients don't come in for that, right? They come in for incontinence or constipation or pain with sex or other things. But then we start to process some of this, or we start to kind of investigate certain things. And people are like, well, my parents divorced when I was 8, and then I had all this anxiety, and I had an eating disorder, or I started playing a ton of sports to just kind of distract myself, or I had a partner that maybe wasn't the most gentle with me, or whatever, but we're not thinking trauma internally. And I think that's way more common
Yeah.
of a thing than like true trauma. I mean, I see those patients as well, and there's obviously issues on both sides, but I think the little t trauma is a lot harder for patients because it's not something that's like on their mind or something that they've consciously come to that on their own always. And so it's tricky because they may have these symptoms but can't relate it to a certain event or a certain thing. And so how do we know to go into pelvic PT? Or even if we do feel like it is a dysfunction or a trauma that happened over and over, well, I'm going to go into a pelvic PT and then she's going to unpack all that. Like,
Yeah.
can I emotionally go through that again? And if I can, she's going to then give me exercises for me to get better, which is great. That's the end goal. But can I emotionally do that?
Yeah.
Do I have the space to do that? So it's so like that little t trauma. That's a lot,
It
and I
is.
want people to understand and know that, like you said, like no shame, right? Like even if you need to come in, like you'll get
Yeah.
there. But that's a really tough part of pelvic floor stuff
Well,
for sure.
this is one of the things, if somebody's listening right now that is like already getting like wanting to shut down a little bit because they're like, oh yeah, yeah, I have trauma, or I don't think I have trauma, but I'm getting anxious just you talking about this. This is what I try to tell people when I take people through a trauma recovery is that the time that you are not no longer, hopefully, you are no longer in that traumatic experience, right? You are no longer in that traumatic experience, but in the traumatic experience, you had to kind of shut it down and kind of stuff it in to survive.
Yeah.
And now when we start thinking about it, it starts to come back up. And you're like, oh, I don't want to do that. I've spent a lot of time stuffing this down,
Yeah.
holding it in muscles in our jaw and in our pelvic floor. Those are the areas we want to hold, clamp everything in, because if you
Yeah.
think we're stuffing it down, where are we stuffing it? Right in our core. So what's the top hole of the core? Our mouth, closed. The bottom hole of the core, our vaginal canal, closed. Like
Close.
we're
Yeah.
not letting anything get out of, we're stuffing it in. And so what I want to remind people is you're no longer in that moment. And so the emotions will come up the first time you access some of these areas, it might release the emotions of when you were there last time, the last time you felt it. And it's going to feel
Yeah.
like a big wave, like almost a tsunami wave. But then the wave's going to come down and it'll be less. And the next
Yeah.
time you do it, there'll be another wave, but it'll be about 50%
Not as high. Yeah.
and it'll come back down. And then the third time you do it, it's going to be about 50% of that and then it's going to come back down. By the fourth time, it's going to be a ripple. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's like basically three times with the one first time. And I always say, like, there are some sad movies that I watch and I know I'm going to cry and I still press play on the button, right? I still watch Terms of Endearment. I still watch Steel Magnolias. I still watch Secret Life of Bees. I know I'm going to cry. So I make this space. I'm not going to do it every day, but if I know I'm going to cry, I know. So if you make space for that first tsunami wave, it's going to rush over you, and then the next one, and it's three times, and you can do anything three times, and each time
Yeah.
it's going to get less and get better, and you're going to feel so much better on the other side of it. There'll be other little traumas that come up, but it's doable. It feels overwhelming because all you can think about is the potential of the tsunami, but it's just a
Yeah.
wave. you
Yeah.
know?
And I think knowing, that like the provider that you're seeing too, like we've both gone through our own like body issues. So we get it, like, and we can
Oh,
really
well, definitely.
empathize with, like I worked at a pelvic physical therapy clinic and she asked me to come in as a patient because she could see all these issues. And I canceled that appointment 3 different times because I was so nervous. And I like worked at that office, so that shouldn't be a nerve-wracking thing for me. But so like we get it, but we can also empathize with what you're
Yeah.
going through and what you're feeling. And we went through the same things,
And we
and so
create
I
the
think that
space
may
for
help.
it. We just create the space for it. We have Kleenex in our office. If you wanna cry, you can cry. If you wanna shut down, you can shut down. Whatever you need to do, we have space for that. I
Yeah.
and people don't need to apologize. Never
Yeah.
apologize for having an emotional reaction. It is a
Yeah.
release that needed to happen, and I actually feel honored that you feel safe enough in my presence to let it go.
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
it's a
Yeah, I
special
think a lot of
moment.
practitioners don't like to see people cry, and they'll kinda do whatever it takes to get them to stop crying, and I want more of it as long as you feel safe, like, if you are going to let out that release and that emotion, like, yes, please do it with me where I can, like, help you work through it,
Yep,
So, yeah.
and yep, so don't be afraid of that. And again, it's, getting the right person.
Yeah,
Um, I love that. I love that I know so many amazing pelvic floor therapists that are that see the big picture, and I just wanna encourage people out there that there are some amazing, women that do this work, and to it's worth it, and it's so
yeah,
valuable. It's so valuable. It is, in a way, like counseling for your body, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. I feel like a counselor most days.
We're not counselors, we're not gonna pretend we're counselors, but we feel, we see what you're holding and
Yeah,
what it feels like to have the strength to use the right muscles to do the right things and be able to release some of what's happening is these little muscles are trying to hold on to more of a task, and they are not released to do the things they're supposed to do, and there's just this muscle imbalance, this kind of confused connection going on, and you have
yeah,
to be intentional and be present to figure out what muscle needs to do what, where the blood flow needs to get, you know, yeah, all of that stuff. But it's totally doable, and yeah, it's totally doable. So
yeah,
we're gonna have to do another one where we talk about clients and stuff like that. But I want to get to the point where we give people some action steps of like what is the first thing that they could do, um, whether they're ready
yeah.
or not ready to go to get care. There's things you can do if you're not ready to dial the number to get into a pelvic floor PT. Um, what's the first thing? I know my first thing's
Mine's breathing.
ears breathing. Yeah.
Yeah. First thing that you can do is focus on taking that nice, deep, kind of diaphragmatic belly breath, right? Inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth. Because we know with exhale, we're going to actively engage that pelvic floor and core. With that inhale, we're going to get that nice lengthening and relaxation. So if we start to focus on the breath, that can help with a lot of those emotional kind of feelings. But that's so tied to the pelvic floor and core that if we can at least start that, and that's probably one of the hardest things that I teach. And so if someone has a little bit of knowledge about it coming in, I feel like that's huge with helping them to understand these small little areas and just being aware of the breath. Are they holding their breath? Are they doing a lot of chest breathing? And have they ever thought about that before? When they're, undergoing like a challenging task of picking up their kids, or are they holding their breath as they do that? Are they breathing as they have a bowel movement? Are they exhaling and breathing as they push out that baby? Like breath is so a part of everything that we do that for sure is the most important piece for me.
And it also comes back to that nervous system that, it calms our nervous system. It can help us get out of like that fight or flight and into that, rest and digest and that heal and feel place that we need to be. I typically start with education first, because I feel like knowledge is power, and then I talk about breathing. But first, I kind of give them a little bit of an anatomy, like what is your
Yeah.
core? What is your pelvic floor? What does it really do? Because it's not what you think it is. It's not Kegels and crunches. That's not what the original design in the Garden of
Yeah.
Eden was of these muscles, right? So what are they really designed to do? And then also, like, I think we can underplay and overplay symptoms, and like kind of go onto these big ends of the spectrum, black and white. And I think having a symptoms journal or documenting what is actually really
Yeah.
going on. Like, because people will say, "Oh, yeah," like, they'll either say, "Oh, it doesn't happen. I don't leak that often." Well, what does "not that often" mean? And then
Yeah.
if they start writing it down, they'll go, "Oh, it's actually about 4 or 5 times a day." Or people will say, "I am wetting my pants all the time." I'm like, "Okay, what does that look like?" And it's actually it was just one time with a really bad sneeze in the last 2 weeks, but it was so significant
Yeah.
that that one time was too many times, right? And so, like, those are completely different symptoms. Like, 4 times a
Yeah.
day and one with a big powerful sneeze once every 2 weeks, are different symptoms that tell us different things, and that information brings a lot of clarity. So I think that
Yeah.
kind of getting some education and not being afraid of of opening the door and looking at what's really going on. Like, how often
Yeah.
is it happening? How severe is it? Kind of get a picture. I feel like that helps empower people to go,
Yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
this is significant. Like, there's
Yeah, I
this
think
is
that
going on
awareness, right,
here.
of them just being aware of their posture, aware of their bowel and bladder habits, like
Yep,
just having that awareness piece is just
yep,
one step, right, in the right direction. And
yep.
that's just huge, especially when we do start to give you exercises and stuff. You already know, oh, yeah, that's when I need to do that particular thing, or this is why I need to do what I'm being
The
asked to
why
do.
behind it, the why behind it. And
Yeah.
then posture and breathing, people
Yeah.
totally underestimate, and that's like, I mean, I would say that's the foundation of everything I
Yeah.
teach at the Tummy Team is posture and
Yeah.
breathing related. It's the foundation of core foundations, posture and breathing. And people are like, "Oh, I have terrible posture." Well, most people do.
Everyone says that.
Most people do. And technology, our furniture, habits, weakness, parenting postures, um, height differential in your marriage, like
Yeah.
all kinds of things can contribute to that.
Yeah.
And so I just say we got to start somewhere. And if you could just start thinking about a cable pulling you from the crown of your head as much as possible, and then how do I need to support whatever I sit in to sustain that?
Yeah.
Don't try to do it with weak muscles all the time. Like, obviously, if you had stronger postural muscles, you'd probably have better posture. Your body's a
Yeah.
use it or lose it system, and you haven't been using your postural muscles, so they're weak. But you got to start somewhere. So, like, just elongating and the breathing and recognizing that, what happens when we breathe is when we take an inhale, your lungs expand, your diaphragm drops, your belly actually gets a little bit bigger
Yeah.
on that inhale, and on the exhale, it's the reverse. The belly comes in, the
Yeah.
diaphragm comes up, the lungs empty out. People wanna do that in reverse a lot of times. They wanna do a lot of,
Yep.
sucking in and dropping down. And honestly, that is one thing that will make a huge difference in a lot of your pelvic floor and core issues is
Yeah.
just on your own, start working on breathing.
Yeah, one thing I usually say is like, why don't you just initiate good posture every time you do a household task? Dishes, laundry, whatever, and initiate it there. It's going to be my job to help keep you there in terms of like the strengthening and building up your core and getting you stronger there. But it's your job to at least initiate it, and then we'll improve it, as time goes on. And so just
Yeah.
thinking about stacking the big joints Don't make
Yeah.
it, super complicated. Just try and do your best in those positions. Yeah.
Yeah. Any improvement, it adds up. Um, I think the other things that people can do on their own before they make that call, is, moving a little bit more, like eat gentle movement, right? Looking at
Going for
stressors in
walks.
their life. Yeah. Like getting out, like not beating their body up, but gentle moving can be really good. And then what do you tell people about nutrition, water intake? This is a hot topic. Bowel
Yeah.
bladder stuff. What do you tell them that they could be doing pretty much right away, start thinking about?
So in terms of water, there's been this obviously like we are a dehydrated probably, community for the most part. But if you're not getting 80 ounces, then something's wrong with you. And then you feel like the shame at the end of every day because you didn't get to 80 ounces. Like there's 100-pound people and there's 500-pound people. So not everyone needs to be drinking 80 ounces. But what I usually tell them is look at what's going on in the toilet. Like, is it mostly clear? Are you going to the bathroom every 3 hours and like 10-ish to 15 seconds? If that's pretty good, you're doing a great job. In terms of constipation, are you having a soft and firm bowel movement every day without straining? You're probably doing a decent job. So just doing your best. 60 to 80 ounces of water is like our kind of average that we're looking at, but it doesn't need to be a gallon of water every single day. Some people like that and that feels good for them. That's great. Nutrition wise, I ask them, are you eating mostly whole foods? That's my main question. Are you mostly eating whole foods? Do you have a little sugar here and there and processed food and fast food? Fine. But are you mostly eating whole foods? Obviously, if there's constipation issues, like severely, we're looking at fiber intake and how much fruit and vegetables are they truly getting, especially in the winter when we tend to kind of go more carb. I'm very, active person myself, and I really prioritize health and nutrition, but not all my patients need to be perfectly like that. Pregnancy wise, I do make sure, they're getting enough protein in, especially if they are anemic or they have other issues. So it's definitely a question and something that I'm asking them about. And if they want more information, I'll give it to them. If they feel dialed in and they're good to go with that department, then, we can kind of leave it as it is. But we don't need to make people feel even more like it's one more thing now I have to do is now go home for my family of 6 and make organic, from the ground 5-course meals every single meal. And that's not the case. Great. If that works for you and you want to do that and you don't have stress with that, cool. But for the most part, just do your best, 80-20.
Do you feel like, with your, incontinence patients that they try to limit their water?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
do. And you think that would work, right? Like you think oh, if I decrease my water intake, my bladder's not going to fill up as much. I don't have to pee as much. But we're really just creating an acidic environment for the bladder. And so definitely try not to do that. I know that can be hard
Feels
and kind
very
of,
counterintuitive, but
yeah,
it is a definitely a very, common misconception that you need to drink less.
yeah.
Uh, yeah. So
Keep that water
there's
intake up.
yeah, keep the water intake up. Okay. I feel like what I hope what people heard today was they're not alone. There's a lot of very valid reasons why you may have put this off, but also this is so important and accessible and impactful that it's worth the investment. And there's options for you. And some people, like, the cool thing about the tummy team is if they live in a very rural area, I have resources that are online that they can do at home. And it's not the same as seeing an in-person physical therapist, but it will help you tremendously. And some people, it's what they needed, exactly what they needed.
Yeah.
Some people, it gets them to
Better
the
than
point
nothing.
where, okay, I've done all these things. Now I have these couple things that I do need to see somebody in person
Yeah.
for. Um,
Yeah.
but there's also, if you're in, we live in the Camas, Portland, Portland, Oregon, Vancouver, Washington area, and there's Pelvic Floor Place. like you need more clients, right? But
Yes, come in.
yeah, but
And I
you
do
do it.
offer those 15-minute free consultation, just to like meet me, look at my space. You can get familiar with me. Do you resonate with me and my language? And it's just a time for you to ask questions and see if this is a good fit for you. Anything across the board is game. I just want you to feel comfortable when you come in, and be able to feel like you can trust me with your care.
Yeah. And you let them bring their kids, huh?
Yeah, I do. I
Yeah.
have a kids table out in the kind of lobby area. There's tons of baby toys and kids toys. I don't want that to be a reason why they're not coming in. Now, you guys know your kids better than I do. And so if you're like, they're going to run around with their chickens with their head cut off and I'm not going to be able to focus on anything you tell me, then obviously that might not be the best. But nursing babies, obviously little kids, totally fine to come in. We're so used to it. If you need a nurse, if you need to change a diaper, we got a changing table here. Like we are used to lots of babies here. So yeah.
Yeah. I think that's awesome. I also do free consults with people if they just want to talk through it, because I know everybody, sometimes there's unique situations, and honestly, to you, your situation is unique and personal to you. And so we definitely hear that, and hopefully
Yeah.
you've heard our hearts behind this. And I just also would have to say that I don't know any pelvic floor PT that does this work that doesn't really care about this work.
Yeah.
It's a passion project, right? We do it because we're passionate about it, and usually because we have personally seen the impact of it, um, but always because we see that life-giving impact for other people. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So, it's never too late. It's really never too early. It's really good to be proactive. Don't wait till it's too late or too long, not been so long, it's not too late, but don't wait so long that it's just more work for you. I would say the
Yeah.
number one thing that clients say to me is, "I wish I came sooner."
Yeah.
Yeah,
100%. Every
yeah,
single new patient comes in the door, and it's almost like an emotional thing for them of, I was let down by this community and no one told me to do this sooner. And I should have been told that, and it's heartbreaking to hear that. Cause it's like, I wish I would have known you then, and I could have told you to
right.
come in, but
But
yeah,
I think we're changing it. I think we're
yeah,
changing it. I think our daughters
kids
are
are
going
cool.
to be the next generation, is gonna be super empowered, and I think it's also people are coming in more now just because it's more known that this is something
Yeah,
that you don't have to live with and that we can help you with. So,
yeah,
um,
absolutely.
thanks for doing the work you do, Christina. Thanks for joining me.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we'll do another one sometime soon, okay?
Okay. Sounds good.
I know you have a client to get to. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye. Once again, thank you for joining us at the Tummy Team Journey. We would love to help you restore your core and be strong for the life you were meant to live. You can get more practical strategies at thetummyteam.com, and we'll see you next time.